The desert had a way of humbling even the strongest souls. It stretched endlessly, a vast sea of dust and silence, broken only by the whisper of wind brushing against dry grass and old wooden fences. For most people, this land felt empty. But for Samuel Hart, it felt alive. He had spent over 60 years waking up to the same horizon, watching the same sun rise and fall, working the same ranch with hands that had grown rough but never cruel. Samuel was known around the nearby town as a quiet man, polite, steady, the kind who listened more than he spoke. Folks said he carried sadness in his eyes but kindness in his heart. They weren't wrong. That morning, Samuel mounted his horse just after dawn, as he had done nearly every day since his wife passed. He followed the fence line slowly, checking for broken posts, listening to the land like it might speak back. The golden light painted the desert in warm hues, but Samuel's thoughts were elsewhere, on memories, on loss, on the question he still asked God every night. Why am I still here? He never complained. He just kept going. That's when he saw her. At first he thought she was a shadow cast oddly against the fence. Then she moved. A young woman sat slumped against the weathered wood, knees drawn to her chest, her head tilted slightly upward, as if she were conserving every last breath. Her clothes were dusty, her face streaked with dirt and exhaustion, but there was something else there. Fear mixed with pride. The kind of fear that comes from being truly alone. Samuel stopped his horse instantly. His heart clenched in a way he hadn't felt in years. He dismounted slowly, careful not to startle her. The desert could make people suspicious. He noticed her dark hair pulled back roughly, her skin sunburned, her lips cracked. She was native. Samuel recognized the features instantly, not from stereotypes but from history. His own grandfather had taught him respect for the land's first people, had told him stories of injustice, of silence, of survival. Samuel swallowed hard. She looked up at him, her eyes sharp despite her weakness. She didn't beg. She didn't cry. She simply watched him, ready to defend herself if she had to. Samuel reached into the saddlebag and pulled out a bottle of water. He held it out gently, his hand trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. "You're safe," he said softly. "You can drink." "I won't hurt you." She hesitated. Then slowly she accepted the bottle. Her hands shook as she drank, each swallow like a lifeline being restored. Samuel crouched down beside her, keeping his distance, respecting her space. He noticed her ankle was swollen badly, bruised and raw. She had been walking for days, maybe longer. "My name's Samuel," he said. "What's yours?" She paused before answering. "Ayanna." The way she said it carried meaning, history, pain, resilience. Samuel nodded, as if honoring something sacred. "You're a long way from anywhere, Ayanna." Her eyes dropped to the ground. "I got lost." Samuel knew there was more to that sentence than she was ready to say. Lost wasn't just about direction. Sometimes it meant fleeing. Sometimes it meant surviving. He helped her to her feet slowly, supporting her weight without forcing it. His ranch was a mile away, not far for a horse, but impossible for her in her condition. He lifted her carefully, settling her onto the saddle, and walked beside them the entire way, refusing to ride ahead. Every step felt purposeful, as if the land itself had been waiting for this meeting. As they approached the ranch house, smoke rose gently from the chimney. Samuel hadn't realized how empty his home had felt until that moment, until someone else stepped into its silence. He helped Ayanna inside, laid her down, cleaned her wounds, and cooked the first proper meal she'd had in days. She ate quietly, tears slipping down her cheeks without sound. That night after she fell asleep, Samuel sat alone at the table. He folded his hands and prayed, not for himself, but for her. And for the first time in years, he felt an answer forming in his chest. Sometimes faith isn't restored by miracles. Sometimes it's restored by choosing not to look away. Morning arrived gently at the ranch, the sunlight slipping through, the thin curtains like a quiet promise that the world had not ended after all. Ayanna woke slowly, disoriented at first, her body stiff and aching, her mind braced for danger out of long habit. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then she smelled coffee. Real coffee. Not the bitter dust she had rationed for days, but something warm and grounding. She sat up, wincing as pain shot through her ankle, and looked around the small room, simple wooden walls, a quilt folded neatly at the foot of the bed, a single framed photograph of a woman smiling beside a younger Samuel. The room felt lived in, not abandoned. and that made something in her chest tighten unexpectedly. She had survived by never letting her guard down, by trusting no one. Yet here she was, alive because a stranger had chosen compassion over caution. When Samuel knocked softly and asked if she was awake, she answered with a quiet yes, her voice unsure, as if afraid the sound might shatter the fragile safety she felt. He brought her breakfast and sat across from her. Not interrogating, not prying, just present. For a long time they ate in silence, the kind that doesn't demand explanations. It wasn't until Samuel gently mentioned that her ankle would need days to heal that Ayana's walls began to crack. Days meant staying. Staying meant trusting. Trusting meant remembering everything she had spent years running from. She stared down at her hands, calloused despite her youth, and when she finally spoke, the words came out unevenly like stones pulled from a deep riverbed. She told him about her reservation, about promises made and broken, about the job she had taken in a nearby town that turned into something darker, about the man who offered help and then took more than he ever had the right to take. She spoke of escape, of running through the night with nothing but pain and fear guiding her steps, of the desert that nearly claimed her life. Samuel listened without interruption, his jaw tight, his eyes glassy, not from shock but from recognition. He had seen suffering wear many faces, but injustice always left the same mark. When she finished, she didn't look up, bracing herself for pity or judgment. Instead, Samuel said quietly, "None of that makes you weak." The words landed heavier than anything else. For the first time since she had fled, Ayana cried openly, her strength dissolving into sobs she had denied herself for too long. Samuel did not rush to comfort her, did not offer hollow reassurances. He simply stayed, anchoring the moment with patience. Over the next days, as her ankle slowly healed, the ranch became a place of cautious rebirth. She helped where she could, learning the rhythm of the land, feeding animals, sitting on the porch at sunset with Samuel as the sky burned golden red. They spoke about faith, hers fractured, his tested. Samuel confessed that after his wife died, he stopped expecting answers from God. He kept believing, but quietly, without hope. Ayana admitted she wasn't sure she believed anymore at all. Yet something about the way Samuel lived, without bitterness, without expectation of reward, stirred something inside her. She noticed how he greeted every morning like a gift, how he treated the land with reverence, how kindness seemed to be his default language. One evening, as coyotes called out in the distance, Ayana asked him why he helped her without question. Samuel took a long breath before answering. "Because once," he said, "I prayed that if God ever needed my hands for something good, he'd use them." "I think that day was for you." The words stayed with her long after. She went to bed. Faith, she realized, didn't always arrive as belief. Sometimes it arrived as action. Sometimes it arrived as a man who saw a stranger in pain and refused to walk past. And as the desert winds whispered outside, something inside Ayana began to heal that had nothing to do with her ankle at all. The desert had a way of remembering footsteps long after people believed they had disappeared, and Ayana sensed it before Samuel ever said a word. It began with unease, small things that felt out of place. A truck slowing too much on the distant road, dust clouds lingering longer than they should. Ayana would pause mid-task, her heart racing, her body remembering danger before her mind could reason it away. Samuel noticed, of course. He always noticed. Years of ranching had taught him that silence could be louder than gunfire, and trouble rarely announced itself politely. When Ayana finally admitted she thought someone might be looking for her, Samuel did not question her fear. He simply nodded and said, "Then we'll be ready." But readiness, Samuel knew, did not mean violence. It meant resolve. One evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, a pickup truck rolled onto the dirt path leading to the ranch, its engine growling with intention. Two men stepped out, one sharp-eyed and impatient, the other heavier, slower, but carrying authority like a weapon. Ayana froze inside the house, her breath caught in her chest. Samuel stepped forward alone, his posture calm but unyielding. When the men asked if he had seen a young native woman passing through, Samuel met their gaze and answered evenly, "No one here but me." The lie came without hesitation, not because Samuel was deceitful, but because protection had become a moral imperative. The men didn't leave immediately. They pressed, they circled, they threatened, they hinted at trouble with the law, with property rights, with accidents that happened to isolated old men. Samuel felt fear then, not for himself but for Ayana. Still, he did not move. When they finally left, promising they would be back, Samuel's knees nearly gave out. That night, he and Ayana talked long after midnight. She offered to leave to run again to spare him the danger. Samuel shook his head slowly. Running doesn't end fear, he said. It just teaches it where to follow. You, he told her. Something he had never shared with anyone, that he had once failed to stand up when it mattered years ago, when a neighbor's family was wronged and the town stayed quiet. The guilt had followed him his entire life. I won't make that mistake twice, he said. The next day, the sheriff arrived. Someone had reported suspicious activity on Samuel's land. Samuel cooperated fully, telling the truth without surrendering Ayana. The sheriff, an old acquaintance, looked between them with understanding. He didn't ask questions that would force answers. He left behind a promise instead. You're not alone in this. Word traveled faster than dust storms. People from town began stopping by, bringing supplies, offering help, standing watch without being asked. The kindness Samuel had given freely was now circling back, multiplied. Ayana watched it unfold in disbelief. She had grown up believing the world was indifferent at best, cruel at worst. Yet here were people choosing to care, choosing to stand, choosing to risk inconvenience for someone they barely knew. The men returned one final time. But this time they were met not with isolation, but with witnesses, with eyes, with consequences. They left without a word. That night, as the ranch settled back into its familiar quiet, Ayana stood beneath the stars and felt something crack open inside her. Not fear, not anger, faith. Fragile, imperfect, but alive. She understood then that kindness was not weakness, it was courage with a cost. And Samuel, standing beside her, finally understood why he had been kept alive long after. Loneliness tried to claim him. Some acts of goodness ripple outward farther than we ever see. Some restore not just one life, but many. Time passed the way it always does in the desert, quietly, steadily, leaving its mark without asking permission. Ayana's ankle healed, but what changed her most was not the return of physical strength. It was the slow rebuilding of trust she once believed was gone forever. The ranch no longer felt like a hiding place, it felt like a beginning. She rose with the sun, worked alongside Samuel, learned the patience of the land and the discipline of care. In the evenings, they shared stories that stitched together two lives once shaped by loss, now bound by choice. Samuel spoke more of his wife, of how love had taught him faith long before scripture ever did. Ayana spoke of her ancestors, of stories passed down through resilience, of a people who survived because they believed tomorrow mattered even when today was unbearable. One morning, a letter arrived from a legal aid group in town. Someone Samuel had quietly contacted weeks earlier. They had built a case. Ayana would be safe. The men who chased her would no longer hold power over her life. When she read the words, her hands trembled, not from fear but from release. She cried, and Samuel cried too, both of them humbled by how many unseen hands had been moving on their behalf. The town held a small gathering not long after. Not a celebration, but a recognition. People spoke of responsibility, of justice, of doing better than silence. Ayana stood before them, no longer hiding, her voice steady as she thanked them not for saving her, but for seeing her. Samuel watched from the back, heart full, knowing he had been used for something larger than himself. Weeks later, Ayana packed her things, not to run, but to return home, armed with truth and support. She hugged Samuel tightly, and in that embrace was gratitude, sorrow, and something holy. You restored my faith, she whispered. Samuel shook his head gently. No, he said. You reminded me why it matters. As her ride disappeared into the distance, Samuel returned to the fence line where he had first seen her. The desert looked the same, but he knew better now. Kindness had altered it forever. That night Samuel prayed again, not out of loneliness, but out of peace. He thanked God for using ordinary moments to perform extraordinary work. And somewhere far away, Ayana looked up at the same stars, carrying with her the knowledge that goodness still lived in the world, waiting for someone brave enough to choose it. Faith, she realized, was never lost. It was simply waiting to be restored by love in action.